Peace, everybody. It's Jamal Talib Abdullah Bey again. Today we're going to be talking about the prison industrial complex, the mass imprisonment of our people, and we're going to talk about, I know I mentioned cannabis in the last video, but we had to cut it short, so I'm going to talk about that because that's one of the main reasons why our people are in prison, and then I'm going to talk about also how they're trying to make it seem like they're going to legalize marijuana in every state when it's already legal for us. Now, I just realized that I forgot to bring the rights of indigenous people with me, but I have it on my laptop, so when I'm referencing stuff, you can just go to that. So, and I'm also going to talk about weapons charges. I did do a video on that already. It's on my YouTube channel, but possessing the cannabis and weapons charges are the two main things that the Europeans are, using as reasons to mass incarcerate our people. So I want to talk about prison industrial complex. So I'm just going to read what I wrote for the matter. So the phrase prison industrial complex is the rapid expansion of inmate population on American soil. To the board of directors of various private prison companies and other businesses that supply goods, services, and other commodities to other agencies, corporations, and organizations for profit. So it's human trafficking. The phrase also refers to the collection of persons, agents, and agencies, i.e. businesses, who prioritize personal financial gain, so for-profit human trafficking companies, over insuring a person's debt to a foreign, mostly European, occupying companies of Morocco, America, is adequately paid via incarceration and free labor, i.e. the human body is used for charity by contract and consent, so it's voluntary servitude. So in short, that's saying a bunch of companies invest in keeping the prisons going. You see what I'm saying? And they're using our human body, our flesh and blood, our energy as labor, pretty much free labor. And if you know people in jail, they'll tell you like they're working for like 15 cents or whatever, and they're producing a bunch of stuff. So the most common agents of the prison industrial complex are corporations that contract cheap labor, construction companies, surveillance technology vendors, so making cameras, stuff like that, companies that operate for food services and medicinal facilities, private probation companies, attorneys, and other private lawyers and law firms or associations, the corporate state, of course, the federal or contract Democratic United States Corporation Company. We already know that these Europeans benefit from us being incarcerated. We already know the United States is a private corporation company, so we know that. The corporate state, the state of Rhode Island or whatever, we already know that they have a prison and they fund this kind of stuff. See what I'm saying? What else we got here? And of course the bureaucratic inquisition against the Moors. That's pretty much what we keep calling racism, is the bureaucratic institutionalized slavery and peonage against our people. So stop calling it racism. That's not what it is. And this is just an example of how it's systematically done. So they enslave mostly Moors. They call us black, and then poor Europeans and other nationals as well. Right, so they try to make it seem like it's fair, like they're legitimate, and they're really not, right? So the portrayal of prison expansion as a means of creating employment opportunities, which is colored, when in fact it is inquisition operations perpetrated against denationalized Moors, poor Europeans, and other nationals, which lead to major economic benefits to the United States Corporation Company and their agents at the expense of the incarcerated people. So again, they're living off our energy when they mass imprison us, but they do it under the misnomer black, Indian, and colored, because I'll go into those definitions in the book, but on paper it doesn't seem like they're dealing with human trafficking, but they absolutely are. So let's see where I am. So greed, hatred, selfishness, democratic inquisition is cheating operations, European colonization, acts of conversion, and the desire for monetary gain through prison privatization, has led to the vast growth of the prison industry and contributed to the increased number of incarcerated individuals, mostly Moors and other American nationals, Mexicans, Dominicans, Taino Moors, and poor Europeans. So when they say, the prisons are overpopulated with blacks and Hispanics and Latinos, they're really saying the prisons are overpopulated with Americans. You see what I'm saying? Because we already established that the Moors, Mexicans, Brazilians, Dominicans, the Taino, we already know that they're the true Americans. So again, it's not racism, it's European colonization, it's cheating, conversion, and denationalization of the Aboriginal Americans. See how that makes sense? So when it comes to, like, I had an example on my computer, but since I don't have a projector, let me see, I'm not sure if it's gonna look good, but I made a video on the birth certificate. They created the STQV in 1580, and then they altered it in 1666, and it was created to convert the Moorish estates over to European administration. So the birth certificate, is really a birth certificate. Both of these, birth and birth, share the same root word, bear. So in law, if you look it up in the law book, the word birth doesn't mean begotten. So, begotten means to procreate. Humans beget other humans, right? The word birth means to bring wholly into existence. So you can bring a corporation wholly into existence, right? So remember, there's two types of persons in law. You got the natural person, which is the flesh and blood, our human body, and then the artificial. So the artificial would be like, a corporation. And you got the word corpse, which just means body. So in law, when you create a corporation, that has to be documented. So the birth certificate is proof that something was brought into existence. It doesn't mean that a human being was born. It's proof that something was brought into existence. So they convert our life, our energy, into something that it's not. You see what I'm saying? So they use this instrument, the birth certificate, or certificate of live birth, to encroach on our life. So since the government can only deal with the regulation of commerce, the birth certificate is a commercial instrument. So every time they attack that, since you think you're it, you willingly consent to be that, and you put your body up as surety to whatever that corporation can't pay off its debt. You see what I'm saying? So since you transact business in that name, the all capital letters name, so since, my name is Jamal, so on the birth certificate that they try to appoint to me, it looks like this, all capital letters. So if I transact business in that name, which they converted to via the STQV trust, that's owned by Europeans. They created that, not my mother. You see what I'm saying? So if we think that we're it, which absolutely isn't it, it's not a person, it's an artificial person, which makes it a it. If we think we're it, we transact business in that name. That's how the Europeans have access to our wealth and our estate and stuff like that. That's why they can imprison that thing. It's just our body is surety, and we think we're that thing. You see what I'm saying? So this would be the birth certificate. That's not me. It can't do anything on its own unless I move it. So I'm transacting business in that name. Boom, 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 boom. And then when they go to enforce that contract, so enforce any contract that this thing made with that company, like this would be the birth certificate, and this is the state. If you register yourself with the state, then you're saying you belong to the state. So that means, we already know that the states are corporations, right? So that means you are agreeing to live by their private corporate law, and if you break their private corporate law, you agree that your physical body is going to be surety to pay off that debt. That's where the prisons come in. As an example, let's say I go get I go to the DMV, and I have this all laid out. I go to the DMV, I say I'm a commercial driver. Remember, they have the power to regulate commerce, but human beings aren't subject to commerce. But if you agree to be that birth certificate, then you're agreeing to be subject to commerce. So it's consent, it's an agreement, right? So that means I'm gonna be in this commercial activity. So that means the state, their private corporate law, I'm agreeing that that applies to me, right? So boom, that's one contract. Then I go to the dealership and I get a car, right? Since it's their property, since we only get certificate of title, we don't get the manufacturer statement of origin, meaning we don't own it. Since it's their property, they say, oh, you have to have insurance because it's their stuff. So they have to make sure that there's surety on their stuff, right? So we get insurance on that. That's another contract. That's an agreement. Also, when dealing with the dealership, they have, they get funded by a private bank, so you're agreeing to pay them and the insurance company. You see what I'm saying? So this is all money that you really don't need to be spending, but you're just agreeing to it because you just think it's necessary, right? So we got the state involved now, the corporate state, another private insurance company, the private bank, and the dealership, and they're all working together. You see what I'm saying? This is the racism that we keep talking about. It's really not racism. It's institutionalized bondage via the contracts. You see how that's starting to make sense, right? So to ensure that you agree to these contracts, the private corporate state, so we'll say the state of Rhode Island, the private corporate state of Rhode Island, they have their policy enforcers, because this is corporate policy we're dealing with, not constitutional law. This is private law, so commercial law. So they have their policy enforcers, known as police enforcers. You see what I'm saying? So the police are policy enforcers. So the police are enforcing, or to make sure that if you don't pay off this thing, the so-called insurance, the so-called debt that you owe to the bank, which isn't real, and ensuring that you abide by the DMV's private law, that's what the police are for. So they stop you, see what the hell you're doing with their property, and all that kind of stuff. So if you don't have, whatever they say you need to have by your consent and contract with the DMV, with the corporate state, with the insurance policy, with the banks, and with the dealership, because they're all in cahoots together, they take your body as surety, they arrest you. You go to the Roman Curia, which is the commercial courts, which you think are constitutional courts, which is really commercial courts. That's why you see the fringe around the Star Spangled Banner. And then they send you to jail. And then you work for free. That's really what's going on, right? And I wanted to show an example, just proof that, because we think that they're law enforcement, they're law enforcement, and they know that they're not, and they say it. If you look at one of my videos, when I asked one of the troopers from the so-called state of Rhode Island, asked him if he was a public servant, he said no. And you can just Google this. Because, we think that they're law enforcement. If they were law enforcement, they would be public servants. Because they would be recognized by the Constitution, because they would have an oath or affirmation to the Constitution, which means they have an oath to the American people. And if you look at the sheriff's law enforcement code of ethics, in the first sentence it says they have an oath to the people, right? So you can just Google, if you Google Connecticut State Police, and you can just do this at home, but Google the Connecticut State Police. If you scroll down, they'll say the Connecticut State Police is the primary law enforcement agency for approximately one half of the state's 169 municipalities. Now we already know that they're not the land. Those municipalities are enclaves of their private corporation. So it's kind of like the state, the so-called governor, they would be the mob boss. And their enclaves, their municipalities, the city of Providence, city of Johnson, city of Cranston, that's their municipalities. Those are their little so you'd have the mob boss, the Don, who would be under them? Whoever would be under them, that's them. And then their police are their enforcers. You see what I'm saying? So that's pretty much what they're saying. And serves as the de facto highway patrol for the state's roadway and expressways. So what does de facto mean? So you'd have to go with, you'd have to know what the definition of de facto is. Now we can go to the law book, but you can just Google this as well, right? So I'm just going to pull it up, this right here. So de facto is Latin and it means in fact. It describes practices that exist in reality, even if not legally recognized by official laws. So we would have to know history, right? 1861, our government was overthrown. Congress adjourned sine die, which means without day, which means they stopped being Congress, right? Which was a coup d'etat. So we had a republic, European Inquisitionists overthrew our republic and created the democracy. That's why Civil War happened in 1862. And then Act of Congress 1871, they stopped operating on the Constitution for the United States of America and created their Constitution of the United States of America, where the private United States Board of Directors were doing business as the capital U, capital S, Congress. So they're doing business as Congress, but they're not Congress. That's why they're de facto. So they exist in reality, but they're not recognized by the American Constitution, by American law, or the American people. That's the occupation. That's the so-called racism that we keep saying exists, but it's not racism. It's bureaucratic, institutionalized peonage, human trafficking, and it's just an expansion of the Inquisition that's always been against our people. Authorized by the Pope and executed by their European counterparts. So keep this in mind, right? They're not law. They're enforcing commercial law that you agree to via your contracts with them. That's why they're able to mass imprison us. Because remember in the last video we talked about how nationality is who you have allegiance to and establish your political status with your ability to call into force your rights. So if you say you're a Rhode Islander or you're a New Yorker, Rhode Island and New York, that's not the name of the land. So that means you're saying you're agreeing to this corporate state of Rhode Island's law. You see what I'm saying? The land is Morocco. More is your nationality, not Rhode Islander or New Yorker. So by saying that, you're making an oral contract and you're agreeing to be subject to their regulation by consent and agreement. So that makes it legal, not lawful. Does that make sense? So since you're agreeing to be Negro, black, colored, now let's just go into what that means, right? Let's go into what color means in law. So this is Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. The definition of legal definitions and phrases of ancient and modern jurisprudence. So this isn't just new stuff, right? So let's look at what color means. So color is an appearance, a semblance, or simulacrum as distinguished from that which is real. So this board is white. What I wrote is colored. So it appears that this says birth, but I can just erase that, so it doesn't exist in reality. That's just an example, right? So color of authority is the semblance or presumption of authority sustaining the acts of a public officer which is derived from his apparent title to the office or from a writ or other process in his hand apparently valid and regular. So it's appearance that he has authority. And if you've seen the movie Gangs of New York, in one of the opening scenes he says, the actor says, the appearance of law must be upheld. Now that's de facto. They exist in reality, but they're not law, you see? So since color means something fake, let's see what colored means. It has nothing to do with skin tone, right? Colored, right? Or colorable, that which has or gives color, that which is apparent, that which is in appearance only and not in reality. So if you say, I'm a colored person, you're saying you're appearing to be a person, but in reality you're not. So let's say, if you can't actually do business with Walmart, but you can go into Walmart, into the building that's called Walmart. You see what I'm saying? It's not really Walmart, so it's colored as Walmart. So the building is a building, but you're saying it's Walmart, so that's colored. So it's an artificial person, right? So you can go into Walmart and do business with Walmart when in reality you're going into a building and you're conducting business with an agent of Walmart who's the cashier or the whatever at the register, right? So you got to think on that layer, right? So when you're saying you're colored, because this is an agreement, an oral contract, this is what colored means. Colored means something fake, right? It has been held that there is no legal technical signification to the phrase colored person. Why? Not because your skin is brown or copper toned, because the word itself means something fake. So if you're saying you're a fake person, you're saying you're an artificial person, which means you're a corporation. Now, humans don't have to recognize the rights of other corporations. Like, I can just punch Walmart in the face because Walmart doesn't exist. You see? So I can just mass imprison Walmart because Walmart doesn't exist. So they can just mass imprison colored people because colored people don't exist. Humans have nationalities. You see how the words that we're using is against us? So remember, right, in the Bible, first it was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and all things coming to existence through Him. Now we already know that the word God is derived from the word Sanskrit word huta, which means to invoke, to call upon, and to pour out. And we already know that we're ethereal beings and we're the light beings. We already know that the whole universe is vibration. So every time you speak, you know, that little bass in your voice, you know, you feel your chest vibrate, you know, that's a vibration. So when you say something, you're vibrating. So you're calling stuff into existence. So when we keep saying we're colored people, we're saying by oral contract, consent, and agreement that you don't have to recognize me at law. Because that's what the word colored means. It doesn't say brown skin. It doesn't say a nationality. It doesn't say none of that. It's an appearance. This isn't really red. This was painted red. This is colored. You see what I'm saying? This book, right? This is a piece of white paper with color on it. When naturally it would just be a piece of white paper. You see what I'm saying? So it's literally the words that we're using creates these oral contracts which allows these Europeans to do whatever they want to us. Now, to help alleviate that, you know, the United Nations, they set up their whole committee on 24 to help with decolonize indigenous people in their lands, right? So get rid of the Europeans on their lands to help institute free national government. If you read Article 24 of the Rights of Indigenous People, it states that indigenous people have the right to use and maintain any and all medicinal plants. Now we know cannabis is a medicinal plant, we already know that. So a right which is free and open to all is not subject to a license or tax. That's res judicata stare decisis. That means if you have the right to something, no one can put a fee on it and no one can attach a license to it. Because a license is permissive right. Now since we already have the right to it, we don't need a license. So you don't need a state license or state medical card or whatever, because it's your birthright, right? So let's look at what license means in law. Just so you have more of a standing on what it means, what a license is. License, a certificate or document itself which gives permission. So a license is permission. So when you apply for a medicinal card, since you're saying you're a colored person, you're saying you're black, you're saying you're Negro, you're saying you're Indian, you're saying you're corporate property. So you're asking your master for permission to have something that other human beings already have the right to. And you're agreeing that if you don't follow these regulations that they can imprison you. You're agreeing to all of that. So you can't get mad at someone who's enforcing their contracts with you. Let's start enforcing our contracts with them. Like the rights of indigenous people that Obama signed that all these Europeans are freaking out about. Because now the European United States corporation companies obligated to us. They already been, but under the de jure government, which they overthrew, now they're de facto, but even their CEO, Obama, made it so that they're obligated to us. You see what I'm saying? So let's enforce our right against them. Since they've been enforcing all their contracts on us, let's nationalize, get out of their servant venue, and enforce our contracts on them. You see? So a license is permission, right? Permission by some competent authority. Remember, if you watch these videos, you'll always hear like competence, competent authority, someone who's competent. You see what I'm saying? To do some act which without such permission would be illegal. Permission to do a particular thing, to exercise a certain privilege, or to carry on a particular business, or to pursue a certain occupation. Privilege from state or sovereign. To license means to confer right or power which does not exist without it. So you're saying, excuse me, CEO of the corporate state of Rhode Island, can you please give me permission to have access to this medicinal plant? That's what you're saying. When the United Nations already declared, they didn't grant anything, they didn't confer anything. They just said, oh, this is a right that indigenous people have. You have the right to maintain your medicinal plants. So you can't convert a right into a crime. Is that complicated? Did I lose you anywhere? So forget it. So try not to think about what I said earlier about, oh, the prison industrial complex and all that complicated stuff that I was saying, which isn't really complicated. But if you're new to it, it sounds complicated, right? Just keep in mind you have the right. Now, I'm not saying, no, before I say this, right? I'm not saying go out and start holding, hella bags of marijuana or cannabis or whatever you want to call it and saying, well, this is my right, because we're under occupation. These police, FBI, CIA, they're not lawful, none of them. So they're going to encroach on our rights. What I'm trying to do is to put out enough information out there so that maybe some cops, maybe some FBI agents who don't know this, because most of them do, but you know, some of our own people, denationalized Moors who keep calling themselves Spanish, Black, Indian, who think by joining the system they're going to help fix it. Hopefully, if some of them see this, read this, know this, they'll stop joining their Inquisition operations, which is their police force and all that kind of stuff, and their jails, and stop working for them and start implementing a plan to help protect us. You see what I'm saying? So like we have our own people working these correction jobs and working in these prisons and being these sheriffs for the Europeans who are enslaving our people. And our people always complain about it, but we're supporting their stuff. So long story short, I'm just providing you information. You do whatever you want. If you want to go outside and walk around with bags of weed saying, hold the rights of indigenous people, we have every right to do that. But just know we're under European occupation, and it's not a game outside. These police don't care. They're worried about getting their paycheck, going home to pay off their mortgage that they don't even have to pay. You see what I'm saying? So it's the Europeans put so much pressure on us that we're willing to sell out our own people for just a piece of paper that they can just print whenever they want. You see how they have just ultimate total control? And then we provide the bodies to fund our own enslavement by working for them, working for their police, boom, 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 boom. When the issue is stop doing that, let's implement a plan to correct this issue. We already know we have the right. Before even the United Nations declared it, our people have been doing it anyway. So instead of like agreeing like, oh yeah, we do need a license from you, let's just enforce this. This people paying $300, 300 notes, we already know it's not money, major finance for these cards, when you can save that, help fund a collaborative to enforce your rights, and you won't even need to do any of that. You just start smoking a blunt on the street. Do whatever you want. See what I'm saying? But use reasoning, use logic. Don't just take information saying, oh, this is my right. I can just start doing whatever I want. Like, no, we're literally, this whole racism stuff that we keep complaining about is not racism. It's systematic, legal, not lawful, legal, by consent agreement from our people, peonage, bondage, human trafficking, and these Europeans aren't playing. They live off us being in prison because we provide free labor to them. You see what I'm saying? So think before you act, you know what I mean? At least I would recommend, at least have a body of people, a support system that can go to court with you, your counsel, that can help you through legal situations. Don't go out saying, oh, well, this guy on the internet said I can do this, so I'm going to do it. Well, do whatever you want, but know that these Europeans don't care. They've been living off us for so long that they think that they can just do whatever they want because our people don't stand up for themselves. We just march, pray, get nothing done, and then we go back to work in their jobs. Or we go out and say, kill that person, kill this person, and then we go pay their taxes. And then we go work for them. So it's kind of like they know our people aren't going to do shit. You see what I'm saying? But what we can do is organize, share information, spread the word, and maybe we can get some of our people out of these institutions where we know they're damaging our communities, like the police, like these so-called sheriffs, like these so-called politicians, like these so-called attorneys, like these so-called probation officers who they know law, so they know that they're dealing with human trafficking. So let's stop putting our trust in these criminals, hold them accountable, and maybe we'll be able to fix some stuff. So anyway, right? Article 24, Rights of Indigenous People, says we have the right to maintain our medicinal plants, so it can't be converted into a crime. What they're doing is they're having us consent to be regulated by them. And then once we break that contract, they enforce that contract on us. So again, it's by consent. So our people are going to jail in huge numbers by consent. Stop thinking you're the birth certificate because you're not it. It isn't it. Nationalize. Know who you are. Know which laws apply to you. Know that you have the ability to contract or not. Remember, the United States is a corporation, meaning it's it only deals with commerce. So you have the right to either contract with them or not. And when you, so the Committee of 24, if you look it up, the United Nations, they have literally a special committee that's dealing with decolonization. Now we already know, right? In history school, in school history class, they tell us, oh, the Europeans are pilgrims. They're colonists. So who else would they be talking about? So the Committee of 24 is dealing with decolonization. We know the Europeans colonized all of America. So who must they be talking about? Right? So keep that in mind. Another example, if I was to commit a crime in China, they would deport me. We commit so-called crimes here, how come they don't deport us nowhere? If a Chinese person commits a crime in China, he don't get deported nowhere, he's home. So guess what? He goes to jail. So when we commit crimes, so-called crimes, in our own homeland, they don't deport us nowhere because we're not from Africa over there. We're from Africa right here. That's why they built prisons. Because if we really were shipped from somewhere else, they would be deporting us left and right. Especially since these Europeans claiming that this is their land, when it is not. You see what I'm saying? So keep, like, when I have conversations with people, it's kind of like they don't maintain like this certain like underlining like glue, which is really context, to what's happening. Like we know that these Europeans are Europeans, but we call them Americans. So we know that they're foreigners, but then people will say, oh, you can't, like if hold on, let me try to see if I can word this correctly. Like they'll say, follow the law. What law? Which laws are you talking about? And if you can't be specific on which laws you're talking about, then you clearly don't know what you're talking about. So if you want to be a law-abiding citizen, which law are you abiding by? Are you abiding by some private corporate law that doesn't apply to you? Like the state of Rhode Island, those laws don't apply to you if you're not in contract agreement with the state of Rhode Island. Just like the private corporate law of McDonald's won't apply to you unless you have a contract with McDonald's. But they try to make it seem like Rhode Island is the land. How is Rhode Island the land if it wasn't incorporated until 1832, 1836? And the land's been here way before that. So clearly it's private law. Clearly. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. Right? So keep that in context. With all this legalized marijuana in the state of Rhode Island, legalized marijuana in the state of this, boom. Those people have, you know, same thing with the prison and industrial complex. They've created a system where they can regulate that. So now they can tell how many plants you can grow. And then you have to give them the location of where you're going to grow the plants and how much plants you can have. So they're controlling the economic gain that's associated with that. So they know how many plants are being out there. You see what I'm saying? And then they know that you who got the license, you're going to renew your license. So they know how much money they're going to get on each person. Even though it's not really money, the whole idea is they know how much energy they're getting from people. And I'm just saying money because that's what people call it. I know it's not money. It's private commercial papers, Federal Reserve notes. But it's a bookkeeping system to see what their property is doing, to regulate or to, like if I'm not physically there, I can look at the books and say, okay, these people in Rhode Island, they're doing this, boom, 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 boom. They have this many licenses to get marijuana cards, so we know we're getting this much money per week. Right? And then they compound that from every single state, they bundle that, and they're pretty much saying, this is the estimated amount of money or energy we can draw from these people. We're the stock. You see, that's what people are investing in. So when they say we're going to vote to see how much, to see if we can legalize marijuana, they're voting to see if they're going to allow their property to deal with this so that they can get some type of economic gain. And they're doing it in different states to see how it will play out in those states. And if there's a large economic gain to that, they're going to start doing that in every single state. So the Europeans are benefiting off of that by us thinking we need a license. So to make them go bankrupt, right? Because this is what will bankrupt them, because they have so much investments in our people doing that. We enforce the rights of indigenous people and pay them nothing. Is that complicated? It doesn't sound complicated. Do you see how that works? Do you see how that affects their pockets, and we already know they don't like when their pockets get affected. You see? And in my last video, not my last one, but the one I did about weapons charges, we already know Article 2, the Second Amendment of the Bill of Rights states we have the right to bear arms. Now, they're not charging you with bearing arms, they're charging you with possession of a weapon. Again, in that video, look up the definition of weapon. It's something that's destructive and used for combat, right? As Moors, we already know our high principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, so we're not going to carry any weapons for any type of combat. But we do have the right to bear arms. You see, so when they take you to their court, commercial court, which they're talking about that birth certificate, they're enforcing corporate law on that birth certificate, not you. But since it's a homonym, if you say, you know, your free national appellation, and it sounds like that name that they have on paper, on the record, it seems like you're agreeing to be it. You see what I'm saying? So they're enforcing their corporate law, their private corporate regulation on that instrument that you keep thinking is you, when you as the human being have the right to bear arms. So in a way, they're using color of law, but it's not really, because you're consenting to it by saying you're it, and then they're converting your liberty into a crime, which they're not really doing, because you're agreeing to be it, and you're agreeing to be regulated by the corporate state, which is a private corporation company that's occupying your land. And then that whole thing where that whole system where they're holding you, they're enforcing that commercial contract on you. You keep calling it racism when it's not racism. They're enforcing contracts on you, but you don't know that you're in commerce every day. You see what I'm saying? So our argument is a dead argument, and then they have proof that we agreed to this stuff. Even though, like, as an example, the driver's license, it's not identification. It's proof that you have a contract with the DMV or with the corporate state. So they're using that to enforce their corporate law on you. But when you have your nationality card, show me where Jamal Talib Abdullah agreed to any of this. Or whatever your free national name is. That would be your position. Because remember, they hypothecated that name, and this all capital letters name, it's on all their instruments, because they can only deal with commerce. They can only deal with contracts. So, you know, the driver's license, it has that name on it. All capital letters, right? The marriage certificate has that name on it. The birth certificate has that name on it. The marijuana card has that name on it. But when you correct your name, because you know those instruments are fraud. Fraud has no statute of limitations, so they're void ab initio, right? So they're void from the beginning, since the human being has the right to maintain all medicinal plants. If you have a contract that you're agreeing to be, you know, that agreed to be corporately regulated, once you distinguish that you're not this, then you know, oh shit, that's void, that's fraud. I'm not that. You see how that works? And then your rights are protected, boom. Because you establish a different jurisdiction. That's Article 3 of the Constitution, that's diversity of citizenship. You're not a citizen of whatever corporate state, you're a citizen of Morocco. You're an indigenous person. You have rights. Corporations only have rights that the people give to it. So if you agree to be artificial, you're agreeing to be regulated. Once you recognize your bloodline, you know, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be granted unto you. Seek your nationality, and all your rights will be granted to you. Keep thinking that you're someone else and trying to be someone else, then you're going to be someone else's property, and they're going to regulate you. And in a nutshell, that's what we're going through. Now, and then I also wanted to just do this real quick, because again, I was in the law library yesterday, and some European lady, she was looking at me all funny, because they don't like they don't like that, you know, we're trying to educate ourselves, right? They don't like that. Just like when in our last video we was talking about how they were freaking out about the rights of indigenous people, because once we start waking up, it's over for them. So I wanted to again go into the Rex 84 King Alfred plan on energy and what they have to say about knowledge, because these Europeans aren't playing. They know what's up, and they fear us waking up. Like it's kind of funny, like how fearful, and like once you know like what's going on, and you see how they react to certain things, like Like if, as an example, right, I go into the law library, I'm looking up corpus juris secundum, and I have Black's Law Dictionary, I have Bouvier's, and I have Ballantyne's dictionary in front of me. And then I'm looking, and then, you know, there's nothing but Europeans in there. I'm the only Moor, and the Europeans looking at me, and I'm looking at them, and they make a face. Most people would think it's racism. I know it's not racism. It's like, oh shit, we got Moors in here, and they're learning shit, right? Because this is what they have to say about knowledge. This is under their this is under their energy section, I believe. I'm trying to figure out where it is. Oh yeah, yep. So it's King Alfred Plan, Executive Order 11490, Rex 84, and it's under the energy section. And it says, all science is merely a means to an end. And we already know science is the study of nature. The means is knowledge. The end is control. Beyond this remains one issue. Who will be the beneficiary? Meaning, who will be in control? So clearly the means is knowledge. So I'm in the law library. They're looking at me funny because they know the end is control. Right? Noble Drew Ali said, the wheels of industry will come to a halt for the United States, meaning for the Europeans. And it'll come up, and it'll be, you know, restarted with the Asiatics in control, meaning us. So in order to know how to control something, you must study it, right? So since they're beating us with contracts and law, we have to study law, don't we? Especially since our ancestors taught it to them, to the Europeans during the Renaissance, right? During the 10th century, 11th century, 14th century, right? 12th century, 13th century, I kind of skipped a few numbers, but you know what I'm saying. So the main goal is for the Moors to initiate another renaissance for our people who have been in this mentally dead and civilly dead, civil mortu status. And that's kind of depicted, or not kind of, it is depicted in the Kemetic or Egyptian hieroglyphs. And, you know, if you look up some of the history on Kemet or Egypt, you'll know that a large area, to include Egypt, because Egypt is a big area, right? But what we call Egypt today, that was actually way bigger. And one of the names was Tamari. We already know that it has the word Moor in it, right? We already know Moors preserve the knowledge, right? That's just one of the names, different variations, right? So I'm trying to get back to the point that I was saying. We already know our people always educated the world, right? So it's kind of like we preserve this knowledge and we taught this knowledge. The Europeans, you know, over generations have stripped us from it. So now it's up to us again to not only teach ourselves, but to then teach our, you know, fallen brothers and sisters. So again, back to the Kemetic point. The ancient hieroglyphs where they were raising people from the dead, it wasn't a physical death. It was a mental death. Because remember, black means death. We're suffering for the lack of knowledge. That knowledge is the means to power or control. You get the point? So, I think that's very, like, and then again, Noble Drew Ali, he was an Egyptian adept. And one of the things he said was, study, study, study. And if you would ask me what to study next, he'll say, study yourselves. And then in his oral statements, he says, Moors, study yourself. What does that mean? You must study your history, study your law, study your culture. And with that, I say peace.